The first hint of a problem with the human use of FTL technology didn't come from an impossible detection or a sudden attack. Instead, it was an indirect and easily overlooked piece of news. 3 days of jubilant partying following their Galactic Council win left the Avid bleary-eyed and intoxicated. At the time, this harmless piece of news reached the Galactic Center, and no one noticed any inconsistencies. The Avid liked to party, and their representative had won the election. On the surface, there was nothing wrong with this headline. Just one article in the middle of many other similar articles. Just one species of many whose representatives had become a part of the council. However, the very existence of this article was impossible. Unlike most Federation members, the Avid homeworld Zera was distant from the Galactic Center, a typical planet in the atypical outer edges of the galactic arm. The news article crackled with an impossible headline: 3 days of jubilant partying following their Galactic Council win left the Avid bleary-eyed and intoxicated. It felt like a bad prank. A trip to Zera and back from the galactic core took 16 days flat out, and the election was only 5 days gone. How could the Avid have whooped it up for 3 days straight if the news couldn't have reached them yet? 8 days was the one-way communication delay, but only 5 days had passed. The party was defying the laws of physics, let alone interstellar logistics. Interspecies affairs mediator Ogu was one of the few who had noticed the impossibility. Standing in front of the window of his office, he watched the ships taking off and landing as he waited for the head of the logistics department to show up. When the hissing of the door reached his ears, Ogu spoke without looking back. Which species was tasked with delivering the news of the election to the Avid? We're still investigating the cause of the inconsistency, sir. It's too soon to blame anyone. The voice behind him went on, his tone defensive. Which species was the courier? Ogu had already interviewed every species involved in this incident, attesting to their innocence and leaving only the courier as the suspect. It was the humans, sir, the voice replied. Please be lenient with them, sir. It was their first task we gave them after the FTL tech. I'm sure they felt ashamed to ask for help with the warp cores and made up the report after failing to do the job. Lenient Ogu didn't bother to hide his anger, his voice strong like a drum. What if this task was a war report? What if they had falsified a report about something that would compromise the integrity of the Federation? A species that can't be trusted with a simple courier job can't be trusted with anything. Well, what will happen to them? Sir, I'll visit Zera in person and deliver the news to the Avid. Ogu had made up his mind. My testimony of this incident will be enough to convince the Council that the humans must be expelled from the Federation. Ogu let the time pass, and only when he heard the hissing of the door closing behind him did he leave the window, his hand already reaching for the communicator that he would use to arrange the trip to Zera. 8 days of calculations and dwindling rations culminated in a smooth landing on Zera. Emerging from his ship, Ogu eagerly scanned the horizon, expecting a group of anxious Avid. But a disquieting silence hung heavy in the air. Only a meager delegation of 3, their faces etched with apathy, stood waiting. A wave of anxiety twisted in Ogu's stomach. This wasn't the warm welcome he'd envisioned. The impeccable posture of the 2 Avid soldiers in the back left no doubt that a single Avid delegate came to see him. As far as Ogu could tell, this individual wasn't even their leader. The yellow feathers suggested it was a male, while the current leader of the Avid was undoubtedly a son, undoubtedly a female. What is the meaning of this? Ogu was more curious than angry, but his voice sounded otherwise. We deeply apologize for the improper reception. Ogu the Avid in the front bowed his head, his beak tilting enough that it touched his chest. My name is Enor. The Queen and the governors are traveling, and I'm the only one who stayed behind. Did something urgent happen to your species? Ogu could only assume a crisis great enough to cause their species to ignore the election had occurred. Nothing of the sort. Enor raised his head, his eyes finally facing forward. They just followed the humans to their homeworld to discuss the final detail of an important bilateral agreement. Ogu's surprise was writ large on his four-eyed face, his bulky arms slamming against his chest. The humans came here. Did they bring news of your council win? Enor's rigid posture melted, a relieved chuckle escaping his beak. Even the usually stoic guards exchanged amused glances, their feathers drooping in amusement. Party with us for 3 days straight. You bet they did. They brought news of the win, and let me tell you, it was a celebration for the ages. One even danced with the Queen. That red drink they brought was a hit. Never thought I'd see a party that wild. Well, ever. Ogu ground his teeth. This wasn't the kind of reply he was supposed to hear. How was it possible that the humans had visited Zera? Had they falsified the report and still come here to deliver the news? Something was not making sense. Ogu's brow furrowed. When did the humans? His voice trailed off. grappling with the logical timeline. Enor and his guards exchanged a glance, their stance becoming rigid all of a sudden. The Avat leader then changed his tone back to the original seriousness. "I apologize, Ogu, but the Queen forbade us from sharing any details about the humans. If you want to discuss it with her, you might find her in the home world of humans." Ogu attempted a few more questions, but the result was always a denial to answer followed by an apology. After noticing how much distress he was causing to those Avats, he considered giving up his task. It seemed like he would have to accept that this trip was a total waste of time. 8 days of travel for nothing. The worst part was that none of his questions had been answered, and now he would be forced to return with his mind plagued with an unsolvable puzzle. The only solution he could imagine was some scheme, the sort where the humans and the Avat were plotting something bad together. 8 days out, 8 days back, yet the world that greeted Ogu felt utterly alien. Before his ship had even entered the core worlds of the Federation, a cluster of concerning messages flooded his dedicated channel. A growing sense of unease gnawed at Ogu. Half his messages were from frantic generals reporting many unusual warping signatures throughout the galaxy. More troubling, the pleas for a meeting from various species started politely, then escalated to near desperation in their most recent transmissions. But it was the remaining messages that hit Ogu like a gut punch. No gradual escalation here, just a barrage of nearly 100 messages from the past few days, all blaring about a market crash that had wiped out a chunk of his species' recent gains. It took him no more than a peek to notice how much his species was blaming him for disappearing in a time of crisis. Forced to choose between the frying pan and the fire, Ogu weighed his options: confront the frantic Federation generals or contend with the economic meltdown his species was facing. Reflecting on it, the previous 16 days of pointless traveling suddenly seemed much more bearable. Moments after his landing, Ogu was already regretting his decision. While the generals would have undoubtedly questioned his whereabouts in the previous days, his own species was having a complete meltdown. Even the most experienced economists looked disturbed. Inside Mago's dimly lit office, the only source of light came from the glow of multiple screens surrounding him. This gloomy environment was all Ogu needed to see to understand how badly the economy was going. The problem with the markets. Mago's 4 eyes darted between screens, his voice screaming panic. "Take a look at this." He grabbed Ogu's arm, shoving a large display in front of him. "This chart tracks our holdings in the score system's mines. See that line kissing the bottom? That's not a good sign." Ogu was prepared for a crisis. But all that worry over the holdings of one mining system. When did the galaxy run out of planets to mine all this fuss over one mining outpost? Ogu brushed off Mago's hand and stepped back from the screen. Weren't the losses supposed to be catastrophic? This hardly seems like the apocalypse. Unbelievable. Mago slammed his 4-eyed gaze on a different screen. "Look at this. Many species are listed here, selling their mining shares earlier than everyone else. Humans, Avet, even those creepy green tentacle heads all dumped their stock at once." He jabbed a finger at another screen. "This one says the moons of the score system are depleted. That news wouldn't have arrived for days. How did they all know to sell beforehand?" Another impossible piece of news arriving faster than it should. Could humans have invented faster-than-light communication? That didn't explain the early partying on Zera. Could they have improved the speed of the FTL tech the Federation gave them? No, that was too much to accept. How bad is the crash? Ogu could stomach the market meltdown. It was a nasty turn, but crashes happened. What truly twisted his gut was the implication on the other screen that some new species had cracked a better version of faster-than-light travel, defying everything he thought he knew about the laws of physics. As bad as it can be. Mago swiped through screen after screen, his voice green. "Everything here is in a downward spiral. Prices are crashing, even metals and food. Investors are spooked by rumors of faster-than-light communication. They can't handle the uncertainty." Ogu felt a strange mix of validation and dread. Mago's frantic explanation reflected the unsettling thoughts that had plagued him since his return from Zera. It was a relief to hear his suspicions of FTL communication echoed, a chilling confirmation that his species wasn't the only one at stake. "Brief me on how I can help," Mago Ogu said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The messages you sent me were concerning, but I'm unclear on the specifics and how my involvement might be necessary." Mago's eyes left the screen, and his gaze connected with Ogu. "The rumors about FTL are extremely important. If they are false, we won't need your help. But if they are true, you must use your influence in the Federation in our favor. We must learn how humans do it, no matter the cost. Our economy's future depends on it." When Ogu thought Mago was done, he spoke again. the reason his species needed his help becoming clear as crystal. What we need now are answers. Get to the human home planet and dig up everything you can. Go before the other species get wind of this, or else retrieving intel will be the least of our worries. It took Ogu another 6 days of travel to go from the galactic center to the home system of the humans. He had skipped the meeting with the generals, the news of widespread chaos being the last piece of information he had received before his departure. Ogu had no idea what he would get from the humans, nor the sort of galactic society he would return to when his mission was over, leaving him in a perpetual state of self-reflection. How could a single species cause so much disruption without declaring war against anyone? Now that he thought of it, perhaps even a war would have been less disruptive. Anxiety plagued him as the warp bubble pulsed around the ship, his mind unable to contain the curiosity about the sort of reception he would find in the space coordinates the humans had registered in the Federation. Ogu emerged from warp, greeted not by a planet but a dense asteroid field. His initial anxiety quickly morphed into vigilance. This wasn't where the humans were supposed to be. His blood ran cold as the scanners flickered to life, revealing a horrifying truth. 10,000 signatures surrounded his ship, an enormous fleet surrounding his path of retreat outside the asteroid belts. Ogu choked back a surrender as a hail echoed through his ship, but the incoming message held an unimaginable revelation. Attention, spacefarer. For your safety, park your ship away from the tumbling rocks. We don't offer free ship repairs. Disbelief washed over him. The message echoed nonsensically against the backdrop of 10,000 ships. A horrifying truth dawned. The fleet surrounding him was all inactive, maybe even uncrewed ships drifting like ghostly asteroids. The understanding of why any of that was happening only reached him when he decided to investigate the source of the message, and what Ogu found was unlike anything he had witnessed. Orbiting the star in the same plane as the asteroid belt, an enormous shipyard with hundreds of docks resided there. There were hundreds of doors where the parked ships would come and go, resulting in a long line waiting to get in and out of the shipyard. More impressive yet, the gravitational readings leaving the shipyard didn't look like anything he had seen before. Could it be that those ships had been modified to have better faster-than-light technology? That was the only possibility he could imagine. This raised the question of which species all those ships belonged to, and, even more importantly, how were the humans doing that? To invent better faster-than-light travel was one thing, but to take the existing ships and make them faster, that was something even harder for Ogu to accept. If it was that simple to improve the speed of those ships, their owners would have done so a long time ago. He frantically reached for the panel and began hailing the shipyard on every channel. His goal this time was to get a meeting with the humans to get to the bottom of this mystery once and for all. Ogu's negotiations for docking stretched on in a tense back and forth. His species and the humans were strangers, unlined by any formal treaty. He lacked personal connections with the humans, and his only leverage was his position in the Federation, which he shamelessly used to strong-arm his way onto the shipyard. Stepping off his ship onto the pressurized dock, Ogu found himself face-to-face with a lone human. The human's unremarkable features were overshadowed by the unsettling absence of a second pair of eyes. Ogu instinctively averted his gaze, unease crawling up his spine. Interspecies mediator, the human's wry smile hinted at surprise. Not exactly standard reception duty, I'm Ogu, he replied, forcing a neutral tone. The comms mentioned I'd meet the chief engineer. Is that you? Spot on. My name is Leonard, but Leo's just fine. The human's smile widened as he extended a hand. Panic flared in Ogu's chest. Fist bumps, rubbing fingertips, handshakes. Was there some elaborate human greeting ritual he'd completely missed? Leonard noticed his panic and retracted his hand. Well, I suppose a diplomat could handle the situation better. But you have to forgive me. First contacts are not my thing. No worries, said Ogu, his earlier panic fading. The economic crisis had prevented his research, leaving him embarrassingly unprepared. I'm here about your advancements in FTL travel. It's classified, I understand, but rumors about your capabilities are prevalent. Classified. Leonard's brow furrowed. We shared our modifications with the Federation in gratitude for their gift, but it seems the Council wasn't interested. So we built our own shipyard with some allies, offering our services to whoever could afford them. Shared their modifications. How was that the first time he was hearing this? Dismay washed over Ogu. He recalled his reluctance to even consider the possibility of improved faster-than-light travel, an attitude that now seemed ludicrous. The pieces clicked into place, revealing a truth far more unsettling than he could have imagined. The Council's arrogance had blinded them to the humans' potential. Now understanding the reasons for the humans' nonchalance, Ogu pleaded, "Can you share your FTL improvements? My species needs this knowledge." He stared at Leonard, hope flickering in his eyes. He was ready to offer anything for this knowledge, this key to unlocking a new era for his species. "Well, I can show you how we improved the tech," Leonard began, but Ogu's impatience flared. "What's your price?" he interrupted. Leonard chuckled, shaking his head. "The thing is, most species don't trust themselves to do the modding. They just bring their ships here. We offer a very reasonable service. Bring the ships here." Realization struck Ogu again. He now knew why all those ships were waiting outside. The distant home system of the humans was about to become a boom town if word of the upgrade service reached the Federation. What he had learned so far was enough to avoid the financial collapse of his species, but there was one more big question that still needed answering. "But can you explain how your species makes the ships faster?" "I can do better than that," Leonard smiled, pointing to the side. "I can show you the work we're doing with that avid ship over there." Leonard was pointing at a colossal spaceship surrounded by a cluster of activity. Its enormous frame, partially disassembled, towering over the workers below. Welders in specialized suits moved around the vessel, their torches creating a bright display of sparks. Above the ship, a warp core was being hoisted by strong-looking chains, fueling Ogu's curiosity about what they were doing inside that had required the removal of the core. "It would be my honor to see your work," Ogu agreed. "All right then," Leonard laughed. "Just follow me. The occupational safety guys will hate me for this, but I suppose I can make an exception on the safety glasses and helmet for you." Ogu trailed behind Leonard, his curiosity piqued. Despite Leonard's words, Ogu couldn't help but notice the care in the human's gait as he barked orders to halt all work on the ship. The subsequent evacuation only amplified his sense of safety. It seemed they were now truly free from the sparks and ready to inspect the ship's interior. When he took the first step inside, Ogu found nothing unusual. There were some loose wires here and there and some open panels, but nothing he hadn't seen before. Just a common spaceship adapted to the size of an avid. Leonard didn't even stop on the bridge and rushed straight to the core room. "Take a look," he said. Ogu hesitated. He'd envisioned a complex machine, a marvel of alien engineering shrouded in secrecy. Instead, Leonard gestured towards a shockingly normal core room. However, a single glance to the side sent a jolt through Ogu, a primal fear that left him breathless. 7 cores. His voice was filled with disbelief. "But how? There's only supposed to be one." He gaped at cores piled over each other, his earlier curiosity replaced by cold dread. 8, actually, Leonard corrected. "The last one hasn't been installed yet." Leonard extended his arm and leaned against the wall, the welders outside laughing for some reason. "We figured a month of traveling to cross the galaxy didn't feel exciting enough, so we just added more cores. And it worked." Ogu scoffed. "Cramming more cores into an engine? That's unheard of. Every species knows adding cores causes instability." "This has to be a joke," he grumbled. "Those things overload if you look at them funny, let alone try to get them to work at the same time." The laughing outside intensified. "Exactly." Leonard remained impassive. "That's why they're never activated simultaneously. We cycle them through controlled overloads, feeding them just enough power to trigger a shutdown right before the critical point. By the time the cycle completes, the first core is cool enough for another." Go panic gnawed at Ogu. He was not an engineer, but even he grasped the inherent dangers. There were dozens of variables to account for: temperature, fuel, speed, radiation, etc. He couldn't imagine a single species besides the humans who would even attempt such a crazy idea. This is madness. What if a core fails to activate? What if the timing slips? One wrong move, and the whole ship explodes. "True," Leonard chuckled, a sound that was mirrored outside. "It's a delicate dance, but this isn't exactly uncharted territory for us. It's all about timing and control. A problem our ancestors solved centuries ago with those old V8 engines. They were ticking time bombs if you messed with them, but some folks mastered them like a symphony." Ogu stared at Leonard, a mix of awe and trepidation warring within him. The human solution was undeniably effective, bordering on reckless. Yet what else could he say in the face of success? The future of interstellar travel and perhaps the fate of his species now hinged on a system that defied logic and thrived on controlled chaos. He would have to come to terms with the idea that sooner or later, he would be forced to travel on one of those crazily modified ships. One nagging question still lingered in Ogu's mind. How did your people ever think cramming those cores together was a good idea? Some engineer cobbled it together first, then everyone else piled on. Leonard admitted, the amusement gone from his voice. Let's just say the early prototypes relied heavily on duct tape and prayers. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says we will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.